Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Peaceful World series. And today I'm here with Jack Pransky, and I'm very honored to have him on the show. So hello, Jack.
Hey, it's pleased to be here, Sebastian.
And today I want to first start with showing you a book of Jack. It's called Modello. And it's a book he has written about a community, a city in, I think it was Florida.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And the topic of today's interview will be how to change communities. And I also want to dive into one thing I think will be addressing a very big problem today, which is domestic violence. And yeah, I think we can start right away. So can you please describe this project or the theme of the book a bit?
Well, let me first talk about the way that it is usually done, because I was trained as a community organizer. And as a community organizer, we were trained to go in and go into a community and make friends with the people and help get them upset about the conditions that they were in, so that they would want to take action and change those conditions. And out of those changed conditions, then people would get more of a sense of health and well-being. So that's the traditional approach to community work, and it's from the outside in. You know, it's like if people who live in conditions that are unhealthy change those conditions, then they will become more healthy themselves. Well, the way Roger Mills went into this community was the complete opposite in one sense, and in another sense not. Like, he went in and he attempted to make friends just like a community organizer does. But the difference is that he felt, and I totally believe this these days, although when I first heard it, because I was trained as a community organizer, it really did not sit well with me at all, was that he said, you have to bring people's self-esteem up first. You have to help them see that they have healthy self-esteem already deep within them. He saw the health in people already. He saw how they were inadvertently getting in their own way with their thinking, and that was what was causing their problems. And when they begin to see how it's an inside-out job, not an outside-in job, then they, once they felt more health and well-being themselves, they then went out of their way to change the conditions of the community, because from a position of health, they said to themselves, we don't have to live like this. There's no reason why we have to be living like this. So they worked together to change the conditions. That's prevention or community work from the inside out.
So it was not by putting a system around people, but by taking them to a place where they felt that everything is okay, or that there's nothing wrong with people inside, so that they could bring out more common sense. Or
yes, that's right. And you know, everybody has what you could call the essence of their being. You know, some people call it the soul, some people call it their spiritual essence, some people call it innate health. Whatever it is, it's like, it's who people really are behind all of the stuff that we think about ourselves. So it's like what we bring into the world with us. It's the essence of ourselves somehow. And that is pure peace, love, wisdom, well-being, automatic self-esteem. It's just the whole package. And then people think themselves away from it. So they think they're not that anymore. But when Roger Mills went in there and he saw that in them, people responded to it, you know, much like a plant gravitates toward the light. You know, like Roger Mills came in and he was the light, and they would gravitate to that once they got over the fact that they wanted to get him out of there. You know, it was this white man coming into an African-American community, and they did not want him there at all. They did everything they could to try to get him out. But in his mind, it was like, of course, you know, of course they're going to be treating me this way, given the way that they see things. It didn't affect him at all because he didn't take it personally.
So knowing now, no, now I have to get the English right. So you said that beforehand you worked from an outside-in basis to put on the system on the people. Coming from this inside-out understanding and bring it to domestic violence, a big problem in United Kingdom and I think all around the world. How would you deal with this problem? What would you bring into, or how would you get into conversation with people?
Well, we have to take a step back from it a little bit and see what is causing domestic violence. You know, a lot of people grow up in, a lot of people who are perpetrating domestic violence grow up in situations where they have had violence around them. And yet, so a lot of people think that it's because people were in those environments that has caused them to be this way to their domestic partners or their kids or something like that. But that's not, if we take a step back from it and really look closely, we could see that that's not really the way that it works. Because not everybody who grew up in a violent household comes out perpetrating violence themselves. Even if it's a high percentage, it's not 100%. So therefore, it can't be the environment itself that's doing it if it's not 100%. So what is it? What is it? You know, it's got to be thought. that we take whatever happens to us in through our own thinking, and we make something of that for ourselves. Like we get an experience of that from how we're using our thinking. And then our consciousness comes along and it makes it look and feel absolutely real, so that we would swear to the reality of it. It's just that it looks like reality. When we look out of our eyeballs, we're seeing reality, but it's really that we're just seeing our own thinking in action. And so the thinking that perpetrators of domestic violence have is very, very compelling to them. Like they think that's the way to be in the world. And that's at a pretty low level of consciousness, you know, to think that you have to harm others in order to feel okay yourself. But we are in a position of trying to convince them that what they're seeing as reality is not true. And you cannot talk them out of it, because the reality that they see is extremely compelling, just like our reality is for ourselves. So they're going to be seeing that reality from their level of consciousness. And the only way to effectively intervene in the process is to help raise their level of consciousness so that they can see that that's not really the only way to be.
What I've just seen is why most of the time it does not work to say that someone is wrong, because then we take the reality that is real from a person, and what is left is nothing, and people try to defend what they see, because that's the only thing they will ever have in this moment.
That's right. Now, if it worked, it would be one thing. But it doesn't really work. You can't talk people out of their reality. You just can't. And then, you know, you've got I know people don't like to use this word, but I do like to use it, victims of domestic violence. You know, and the reason I like the word, which goes against the field these days, is because it's not their doing. You know, the people who are getting violence perpetrated upon them are victims of that. Now, the way that they take that in through their thinking will end up determining whether they become survivors, which is the term that's mostly used these days, or not. But that's how they use their thinking. And I'm not putting a value judgment on it. I'm not saying that, you know, if there's a good way to be and a bad way to be about this. I'm just saying that whatever it is that people see about it is what they will get in the form of their experience. Because it's a very interesting phenomenon. You know, why some people who grow up in a home where there's, let's say they grew up as a child and were subjected to child abuse. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon that some of those people will grow up abusing their own children. Some of them will grow up getting abused by their spouses. Some of them will grow up just fine and take care of their kids just fine. You know, what makes the difference is the way that they use their power of thought to determine their reality. They've got a reality too, just like the perpetrator of domestic violence has a reality. Everybody has equal opportunity to break free of the reality that they are seeing now and to rise to higher heights, you could say. I have rendered you speechless.
I've before I went on the interview, I read a sentence by Sydney Banks, which you also put into the book, and I'll read it out loud. I think it resonates with what you've just said. Hope is one of the greatest things in the world, so this is why you talk stories.
Yes. And stories, not for the sake of stories, but stories of rising above circumstances or rising above the way one has seen their life into higher levels of consciousness. Stories of transformation, stories of how that happened. There's so much hope in that. When people have been in the depths of despair, and then suddenly they're able to see a new life for themselves and not be subjected to their own debilitating thinking. You know, suddenly they become free from it. And they see a new life in front of them. Those are the kind of stories that breed hope in others. And Sid was always encouraging people to share their stories of transformation.
Stories are always located in the past, I suppose. Most of what happened. And what really resonates with me is that even though the circumstances or what happened does not change for people, but how they look at it how they look differently at stories they've lived.
That's the present. You know, the only thing that is the past is what happened. Even when a story is told, it's the present now. Because it's interpreted through people's thinking now. That's why the past doesn't really exist. It only exists in terms of how we carry it through, what we make of it now in the present. It's the only way the past can exist, is what we think about it now.
It's funny because sometimes, like you said, when we have different thinking, a story is also, it feels different. When you're in a good state, a story is like probably a story that ends well, or it's like, okay, I learned something out of it. But when we're in a negative state, it seems to feel that something is wrong, or that the past is why we feel bad now.
Yes, that's one of the great illusions of life, is that the past is why we feel bad now. You know, and when we think that, and we realize that there's no way to change the past, we're stuck. But if we knew that the answer does not lie in the past, it lies in what we think about the past, that's our ticket to freedom. It's like, up to this point, the past has had a hold on us like a ball and chain around our ankle. and you know, like, seeing the true power of thought and how consciousness makes it look real, you know, is like somebody hands you the key to the ball and chain. Suddenly you're free. And we realize that the ball and chain is just something that we're the ones that hooked onto our ankle through our thinking, inadvertently, innocently. That was the other thing that Roger Mills saw in the people in the Modello housing project. He saw innocence. And these were people who were perpetrating domestic violence. These were people who were victims of domestic violence. These were people who were beating their kids. These were people who were crack addicts, alcoholics, you know, who perpetrated gang violence. You know, he saw innocence in all of that, because people don't realize that it's their thinking doing it to them. That's the innocence of it. People are always, and Roger Mills used to say this all the time, he said people are always doing the best they know how to do under the circumstances, given the way that they see things. Everybody's always doing their best, given how they see it. If they saw it differently, they would do differently. If they saw it better, they would do better. But they don't. Innocence.
One thing that was really like, before our interview, I watched a documentary about terrorism, and what question came to my mind is like, these people, they seem like they're very off, that they don't see the common sense and they're bad people, or they just hurt people. Do you see a possibility that these people who kill other people will have the possibility to wake up?
Yes, everybody has the possibility. On the other hand, they are very firmly entrenched in the reality that they see. You know, I've seen people try to talk them out of their reality. That doesn't work at all. So what if they saw, what if they were helped to see that what they think is real isn't? You know, that it's just something that we've made up about the way that the world should be, us in relationship to the world, how we interpret the teachings of Muhammad, you know, like that they see their interpretation as real. And yet there are so many other Muslims in the world who take the same teachings of Muhammad and are very, very peaceful people. You know, what do they make of that? Well, it's the same as, you know, any Christian religion, you know, where there's different churches within the religion that see things in a different way. And there was even the Crusades, you know, where they killed people in the name of Jesus Christ.
Mm.
And I mean, to me, Jesus would have turned over in his grave. People were killing in his name. I mean, you know, so people can convince themselves of anything. And then what, you know, you think of the thinking that has to go on for people to think that if I kill other people, I'm going to go to heaven. You know, if I kill the infidels, I will go to heaven. Well, it's hard to fight logic like that, you know. But it's so firmly entrenched in people. And as long as they're seeing the reality, they're going to be killing people. But what if they saw that it wasn't reality after all? And I'm not sure how you help them see that, other than helping them see how it works, not only within them, but within everybody in the world. We all use mind, thought, and consciousness in the same exact way. Different thoughts make it come out differently for different people. And for some, unfortunately, it comes out doing harm to others. I don't think this is what Muhammad had in mind.
Probably not, no. Could you share one story, say in the Modello housing project, that was showing that people can wake up and can, yeah, just be differently in the world when they see something new?
Yeah, okay. There was this woman, well, in the book I called her Thelma. Her real name is Elaine. And Elaine was one of the first two people who I ever saw talk about what happened to them. Roger, you know, I first went to a conference where Roger Mills was speaking, and he brought with him Cynthia and Elaine from the housing projects. Now, Elaine was a severe alcoholic, and she was severely being beaten by her boyfriend on crack. And she had the thinking, oh, and in turn, she was beating her kids. Now, she was one of those people who had the thinking, if my man is beating on me, that must mean that he loves me. I mean, this was her thinking. You know, you can see why thinking like that would have resulted in more beatings. And God knows what his thinking was, you know, but so she learns about her inner health. She learns about thought. And all of a sudden she gets a huge insight. Wait a minute. I'm worth more than this. I'm worth more than getting beaten on all the time. And she said, stop. And if she had said stop before that, it would have resulted in a greater beating. But when she said stop this time, it had the whole force of power behind it from her health. And the guy did back off. Like, he didn't know what to make of it. It would like threw him off. And she ended up, I mean, she had to change the locks on her doors. You know, she kicked him out. She had to change the locks on the doors so he wouldn't, you know, he had a key to the old locks. And you know, she took care of herself. That her wisdom told her to do that. She ended up kicking alcohol without even going through treatment. And she considers herself recovered instead of recovering, which is what, you know, most people in the field, that's as good as it gets, you know, is to be recovering and always feel like you're, that this disease of alcoholism is always hanging over your head. But Elaine thinks of herself as no longer an alcoholic. She can have a beer or two, it doesn't bother her. And yet she doesn't feel the compelling need to have alcohol. So not only did she stop beating her kids, her boyfriend stopped beating on her, and she kicked alcoholism. All from like new insight about her worth. If that's not amazing, I don't know what is.
What I hear is that she stopped being a victim to alcohol, to her boyfriend, to the story she was telling herself about what love is.
Yeah, and mostly she stopped being a victim to her own thinking. That's the only reason that she was in victimhood, was because of her own thinking. Because it wasn't like the guy changed. It wasn't like alcohol changed. It wasn't like her kids changed. She just saw a new way for herself. She saw her health. She saw her worth. Now, I mean, ultimately, she does tell the story later on in the book about how the guy tried to get back into her life, and she would not let him until she was certain that it was going to be under completely different circumstances. And that's what did happen. And they ended up having a pretty healthy relationship. That's amazing too. So he had to have a shift in thinking himself. One thing I learned about whether people understand the three principles or not, if people's thinking doesn't change, their behavior is not going to change. You know, there's a lot of, in a lot of ways, the world works to try to change people's behavior. And there's always a compelling feeling behind those kinds of behaviors. Like people feel compelled to do them. Why do they feel compelled to do them? Because they're seeing the reality of it. And they're just going after that reality. If nothing changes about that kind of thinking, they're still going to either do what they're doing to continue to do harm, commit violent acts, or they're going to have to fight against it all the time because they're still in that mode of thinking. Now, if they have to fight against it all the time, something has shifted in them, but not enough. The people need to get to the point where there is free of seeing through the eyes of violence, as Elaine was in seeing through the eyes of, I need alcohol to survive. It's like, I need violence to survive. I need to keep my wife in her place. You know, I'm the boss. I get to say what goes. My kids better not step out of line because they're in my way. You know, all that is thought. It's nothing but thought that people take very, very seriously until they see that it's just thought. Wow, what a relief that is.
Wonderful. I think that's a good ending. That
Okay.
It's just thought.
That's a good one. Well, you know, it's just thought coupled with consciousness. Because if it weren't for consciousness, thoughts would just go floating off into the universe and they wouldn't make any difference in our lives. But consciousness seduces us into thinking these thoughts are real. That's the title of my next book, Seduced by Consciousness. That's what does it to us. So yeah, it's just thought, but boy, does it look compelling.
Yeah.
and you know, there's all the possibilities of mind. You know, mind is all possibilities. We pick one thought out of all possibilities, and that's what we get. But there's all these other possibilities, and when we see that, we're free from that one thought. All right, now we can end.